Good evening and welcome to our 7th annual Lafayette Reads Together presentation. My name is Madison Manuel and I'm a Community Services Specialist here with Lafayette Public Library. I also have the distinct honor of getting to introduce our guest author, Haben Girma, at 6:45 this evening. Before we begin, we have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of, including messages from our community partners, an acknowledgement of our sponsor, and of course, trivia, which is what everyone's here for, right? Now, without further ado, I'd like to acknowledge all of our community partners who've made this event possible. So thank you to the Lafayette Parish School System, Lafayette Consolidated Government, Acadiana Center for the Arts, Affiliated Blind of Louisiana, Families Helping Families, United Way of Acadiana, LUS Fiber, Lafayette Utility System, AOC Community Media, Addis NOLA, Edith Garden Dupree Library, Basin Arts, Hilliard Art Museum, and South Louisiana Community College. I'd also like to thank our sponsor. Lafayette Reads Together would not be possible without the sponsorship of the Lafayette Public Library Foundation. We at the Lafayette Public Library would like to give a big thank you to the LPL Foundation for 6 years of sponsoring our Lafayette Reads Together book giveaway. This year, Lafayette Public Library has given the community over 1,000 copies of Haben, the deafblind woman who conquered Harvard Law. Lafayette Reads Together is a community read event in which our aim is to bring together all of Lafayette Parish around a shared book. Lafayette Public Library, along with 15 community partners, including LPSS, have come together this year for LRT. Because of the Foundation's generous support, we are now in our 7th year of Lafayette Reads Together. The Foundation might not have been in year 1, but as soon as they heard about this community programming around a shared book, they jumped in and have stuck around for the entirety of this event. It's a great way to foster reading and partnership throughout Lafayette. Without the support of the LPL Foundation, this amazing community building event would not be possible. All of us at Lafayette Public Library thank you for your support. And now, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge some of the programming we have here at Lafayette Public Library. Have you heard about our 100 Book Club? Each year, we challenge patrons to read 100 books between January 1st and December 31st. If you do so, you can become a member of Lafayette Public Library System's 100 Book Club, receive cool prizes and recognition, plus you'll get the bragging rights to say you accomplished something few others could. Registration began on January 3rd, but will continue year-round. The rules are simple. Club membership is open to any reader over age 6. You must read or listen to the title yourselves. You can join at any time, but only titles completed by December 31st will be counted. Paperbacks, hardbacks, large print, graphic novels, ebooks, audiobooks, and e-audio all count. If you think you have what it takes to join our 100 Book Club and complete the challenge, visit our website today at LafayettePublicLibrary.org or stop by any branch to pick up your very own prize claim form, where you can begin tracking books today.
Good evening. The 19th annual Right to Spring Writing Contest is in full swing. Right to Spring fosters creative writing among the youth in our community and gives young writers the opportunity to have their voice heard. Students from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade can submit one piece of fiction, nonfiction, or poetry, and they can submit in English, French, Mandarin Chinese, or Spanish. Each year, over 300 students compete, making it no easy job for our judges to select the top 3 works in each category and age range. Winners not only receive a certificate and an anthology of all the winning entries, but they also get the bragging rights to say they are now a published author. So students, tell us your story. Deadline for submissions is Friday, March 19th, and for more information, visit our website at LafayettePublicLibrary.org.
In addition to Lafayette Reads Together, the Lafayette Public Library has a number of book clubs available for patrons to check out. For example, this month our Classics Book Club is reading The Ginger Man by J.P. Donlevy. First published in Paris in 1955 and originally banned in America, J.P. Donlevy's first novel is now recognized the world over as a masterpiece and a modern classic of the highest order. Set in Ireland just after World War II, The Ginger Man is J.P. Donlevy's wildly funny, picaresque novel of the misadventures of Sebastian Dangerfield, a young American ne'er-do-well studying at Trinity College in Dublin. Dangerfield's appetite for women, liquor, and general roguishness is insatiable, and he satisfies it with endless charm. If you're interested in reading and discussing The Ginger Man, join our Classics Book Club on March 4th at 11:30 a.m. on Zoom. Details at LafayettePublicLibrary.org. This March, our History Book Club will be reading Rising Tide by John M. Barry. Rising Tide is an American epic about science, race, honor, politics, and society. It begins in the 19th century, when the first serious attempts to control the Mississippi River began. The story focuses on engineers James Eads and Andrew Humphreys, who hated each other. Out of the collision of their personalities and their theories came a compromise river policy that would lead to the disaster of the 1927 flood, yet would also allow the cultivation of the Yazoo Mississippi Delta and create wealth and aristocracy, as well as a whole culture. If you're interested in reading Rising Tide, The Great Mississippi Flood of 1927 and How It Changed America, join our History Book Club on Tuesday, March 9th, from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. You can find their Zoom information by visiting our website at LafayettePublicLibrary.org. If you're a mystery fan, you'll always find something to read with our Mystery Book Club. This March, we're reading The Life We Bury by Alan Eskins. College student Joe Talbert has the modest goal of completing a writing assignment for an English class. His task is to interview a stranger and write a brief biography of the person. With deadlines looming, Joe heads to a nearby nursing home to find a willing subject. There, he meets Carl Iverson, and soon nothing in Joe's life is ever the same. Carl is a dying Vietnam War veteran and a convicted murderer. With only a few months to live, he's been medically paroled to a nursing home after spending 30 years in prison. You can find out more about our Mystery Book Club and The Life We Bury by visiting our website. If you're the kind of reader that just loves love, then you'll love our Romance Book Club. On March 24th, we'll be reading Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dodd. Olivia Dodd bursts onto the scene in this delightfully funny romantic comedy set in the world of fan fiction. A devoted fan goes on an unexpected date with her celebrity crush, who's secretly posting fan fiction of his own. Be sure to check out Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dodd and tune in to our Romance Book Club on March 24th at 6 p.m. You can find information on the Zoom call by visiting our website at LafayettePublicLibrary.org. One of our newest book clubs, the Beyond Black History Month Book Club, focuses on Black history, critical race theory, and anti-racism. Our March book will be Stamped: Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi. It's a timely, crucial, and empowering exploration of racism and anti-racism in America. You can find out more by visiting our website or by joining the Zoom call on March 30th at 6 p.m. Do you love young adult books? Why not join our LPL YA Virtual Book Club on Goodreads to discuss a new book each month? We have discussion forums to talk about what's happening in the story, as well as recommendations for new books or books in a similar vein. You can find it by visiting our website at LafayettePublicLibrary.org. This March, we'll be reading Tiny Pretty Things by Danielle Clayton and Sona Karipotra. Gigi, Bet, and June, 3 students at an exclusive Manhattan ballet school, have seen their fair share of drama. Free-spirited new girl Gigi who just wants to dance, but the very act might kill her. Privileged New Yorker Bet's desire to escape the shadow of her ballet star sister brings out a dangerous edge in her, and perfectionist June needs to land a lead role in this year, or her controlling mother will put an end to her dancing dreams forever. Find out what happens in Tiny Pretty Things this March with our YA Virtual Book Club.
Maker Faire Lafayette is back and has changed with the times, so it'll be a hybrid event this year. What is a Maker Faire? Think of makers of art, creators of tech, explorers of science, and bakers, gardeners, and crafters all getting together in one event, April 5th through the 10th. This will be brought to you by Lafayette Public Library, AOC Community Media, and other special partners. Now are you wondering, how can I get involved in all of this? We are looking for makers of all kinds to apply, to show off their skills and crafts virtually and in person. Our call for makers is open now, so go to LafayetteMakerFair.com. Another way to be involved is to attend virtually, in person, or by picking up Take and Make activity. Mark your calendars for Maker Faire Lafayette, April 5th through the 10th, and get all the details at LafayetteMakerFair.com. See you there.
we're here with Basin Arts to bring you a special movement class unique for Lafayette Reads Together.
Danceability is an adaptive dance class to inspire joy through movement for all levels and abilities. The class happens on Saturday, March 6th via Zoom.
We'll have two classes. We'll have a family danceability class, perfect for kids and families to do together. And we'll have an adult danceability class geared towards movers aged 12 and up.
We hope you can join us in movement next weekend.
See you then. Bye, Hannah.
Hi, Haben. Welcome to Lafayette. We're so excited to have you with us tonight. My name is Nicole Flores, and I'm the director at Families Helping Families of Acadiana. We're a family resource center. We support individuals with disabilities and their families. And all of us either have a disability, have a child with a disability. So this is pretty near and dear to our heart. And it was really great to read in your book about experiences that my friends and loved ones have had in the same situation, like at the training center in Ruston and everything, and to see all of this come out and be shared with the world. So really excited to be able to be with you this evening and to share this book with more and more people. Thanks.
Hi, Haben. This is Helen Keller. I'm the Adult Program Coordinator and Information and Referral Specialist with Families Helping Families of Acadiana. We're so excited that you're here with us tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your book and for sharing your thoughts and ideas with us. At Families Helping Families, we work with people who have disabilities, as Nicole said, and at Families Helping Families, our motto is, it's who we are, it's what we do. And we're so grateful to you for being here, and welcome to Lafayette.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Grifford. I'm a biology educator working with my colleague from UL Lafayette, Connie Castile. And we've been interested in Cajun culture a long time, but we are working with the deafblind community here in Lafayette on a documentary film called The Deafblind Cajuns. And although Haben's deafblindness has a different origin than our Usher syndrome, here biologically, she's quite as a wonderful example of how the largest population of deafblind Americans here in Acadiana manage to do all of the things that Cajuns do. Go to college. They use their senses of taste and smell very well when they're eating their crawfish, and all of that shows up in our the documentary film Connie Castile and I are finishing up very soon. Haben, I wish you can be with us in person and taste our boiled crawfish. It won't be long, I hope, before you can do that. There's a lot to be enjoyed. You have lots of good company who speak your language here in Lafayette. For those of you who live in Lafayette and have not yet met another deafblind person, just pay attention. I bet you will run into the deafblind who get together. Before COVID, we're getting together for coffee at the coffee shop on a monthly basis. They may be attending your church. They're walking along St. Mary with the white canes. They may be sitting in classes at UL. The deafblind community here in Lafayette or in the Acadiana area is the largest in America, second largest in the world, because of the gene that came with the Cajuns here to Louisiana. So I hope that the rest of the community enjoys Haben's book as much as I will. And Haben, welcome. Welcome to Lafayette. Hope to see you in person soon.
Hi guys, it's Christy with AOC. And on behalf of the entire AOC team, we would like to extend a super huge thank you, Haben, for sharing with our community during this really awesome celebration of Lafayette Reads Together. We here at AOC are super excited to be partnering again with the library during this awesome community program in which we're aiming to get all of our community members reading, sharing, and discussing the same book. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this year's book selection, it is titled Haben, the Deafblind Woman Who Conquered Harvard Law. And it is a memoir about Haben Girma's personal story working towards a more inclusive world. We here at AOC are also doing our part to ensure that we're raising awareness around accessibility during this time as well. we have a local, regularly scheduled program, Local News Live, that happens every weekday morning at 9 a.m., in which our local community members are featured reading the news, the printed news, for deafblind communities as well as low literacy communities. In addition to this, we've also got a free on-demand workshop that is going on right now, AOC's Social Media Accessibility Toolkit, that's going to help you make your social media posts more impactful and inclusive of more communities. You can get all this information on our website at aocinc.org. Thanks again to all of the Lafayette Reads Together partners, the Lafayette Public Library, and of course, Haben Girma for helping our community to grow by reading and learning together.
Hi, I'm Pam Allen, the Executive Director of the Louisiana Center for the Blind in Ruston, where we are changing lives and exceeding expectations for blind people. And Haben, we are so excited to virtually be with you and so happy that you are a graduate of our program. We are sorry that we can't be together in person, but we know that everyone is going to love hearing from you tonight. And it's always a pleasure to share with you and to hear your story. One of my favorite quotes is from Vice President Kamala Harris, and it is, "If you are fortunate to have opportunity, it is your duty to make sure other people have those opportunities as well." And I think, Haben, that is a quote that you exemplify in every way. Thank you so much for being an advocate, a role model, and a leader.
Hey, wonderful. So I want to welcome our guest once again, Haben Girma, and we're going to be interviewing her shortly, but I wanted to remind all of our patrons that we will be taking questions for her right here in the chat, so you can go ahead and drop those now in the comments. We'll be grabbing them and asking them at the end of the presentation. Good evening, by the way, for those of you just tuning in. My name is Madison Manuel, and I am thrilled to introduce our 2021 Lafayette Reads Together author, Haben Girma. Haben is the first deafblind person to graduate from Harvard Law School. From her, so I just wanted to say that Haben defines disability as an opportunity for innovation. She learned non-visual techniques for everything from dancing salsa to handling an electric saw. She developed a text-to-braille communication system that created an exciting new way to connect with people. Haben pioneered her way through obstacles, graduated Harvard Law, and now uses her talents to advocate for people with disabilities. So now, without further ado or technical limitations, I'd love to welcome Haben Girma, human rights lawyer, speaker, and author.
Thank you, Madison. Hello, everyone. Tech issues are kind of part of life now in the virtual world. Madison, if you ever need to pause things to fix tech issues, just say something, go for it. Because the audience is at the center of this presentation and we want to make sure everything is accessible, audible, and visible. So this is Haben speaking. I'm using my voice. A lot of people ask, how do you speak if you're deafblind? There's lots of diversity in the deafblind community. Some people use voice, some use sign language, some use communication devices. I speak at a higher register. I grew up with some hearing in the high frequencies and intuitively learned to speak at a higher register. There are some communities that dismiss voices for sounding too feminine. We need to create communities where all voices are valued, whether it's a high frequency voice or low register voice, whether someone has an accent, whether someone uses sign language or uses a communication device. And it's up to us to do the work of removing stigma and discrimination against different voices so that all voices are valued. To understand the questions coming in from the chat or what Madison says, I'm using a Braille device. I'm holding it up. There are Braille dots along the bottom. I run my fingers over the dots to feel the letters. Those of you who know Braille tech, this is a Braille note. So that's the name of the device. There are many different types of Braille computers, and one can connect it to a laptop, a smartphone, a tablet, so that you have a tactile display to feel in Braille what's being said, or what's on your website, or what's in an email. I have a typist who will type when Madison speaks, and the words come up in Braille, so I'll feel it in Braille and then respond by voice. So there's going to be a slight delay between when Madison speaks and when I respond, because the communication will still come through. And I'll share a little bit about my book. I wrote my book because I wanted to teach people about ableism. Ableism is the widespread assumption that disabled people don't matter, that we're inferior to non-disabled people. It's hurtful. It's part of so many different systems. It intersects with racism. It intersects with sexism. And we need more people to help do the work to remove it from our schools, from our libraries, from all kinds of organizations. So in my book, I have various stories that show how ableism comes up. I have a story of trying to find work and how employers would dismiss me just because I'm deafblind. One of my friends told me, I know a great place where you can find lots of jobs. Alaska. I really wanted to get a job, so I flew to Alaska. And they were right. There are lots of summer jobs in Alaska, at least before the pandemic. And I was checking on websites for jobs, sending in applications. The employers would see my experiences volunteering, my excellent grades in high school and college, references. So then they'd invite me for a job interview. And at the interview, they'd find out that I'm disabled. And they'd come up with excuses not to hire me. These were tactile jobs, washing dishes, folding laundry in hotels. You don't need sight to wash dishes. When I was growing up, my parents made me do dishes. I tried telling them, oh, I'm blind, I can't do dishes. They wouldn't listen. They still made me do dishes. So I had lots of experience in that field, but the employers still assumed that because I was blind, I wouldn't be able to do the job. And this kept happening over and over again. Jobs I absolutely could do, but employers would dismiss me. This is not unique. It happens to lots of blind people and people with other disabilities. Unemployment for disabled people is double what it is for non-disabled people. Employers are missing out on talented people because of ableism. Those of you who've read my book, you know that eventually I did get a job working the front desk at a small gym in Alaska. And at the gym one day, a woman came over and asked, hey, one of the treadmills isn't working. Can you help me with the treadmill? So I followed her to the treadmill. There were a bunch of buttons on the top. I tried the buttons, nothing happened. This was back when I used a cane. I put down my cane and I felt the machine from top to bottom. Near the bottom, there was a switch. I flicked the switch and the machine worked to life. The woman told me, "Oh my goodness, I didn't see that switch." I told her I didn't see it either. Tactile techniques sometimes beat visual techniques. Disabled people have lots of strategies and alternative techniques for doing a variety of tasks, and employers benefit by hiring us, bringing us onto teams so we could solve all kinds of problems. My manager from that gym still remembers me and says I was one of her most responsible and trustworthy employees that she's ever had. I've since left Alaska, and I've had several jobs since then, but it's an example of ableism and employment discrimination. It happens all over the country. It happens in Louisiana, and we need to remind employers disabled people are talented. Stop assuming we're incompetent. So that's one of the stories from the book, and there are lots of other stories. Madison, do we have any questions? How's everyone doing?
We have quite a few questions, and I'm always taking more. So like I said before, if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat now. But let's go ahead and get started with our first one. Let's see. One of the first ones we asked was, could you tell us about other advocacy cases you worked on, ones that didn't make the book?
So there are many cases I worked on. Let's see. One of the cases I worked on was in the city of Long Beach. There are lots of broken sidewalks, which is difficult for folks who use wheelchairs and mobility disabilities. And the city should have fixed those sidewalks because people who use wheelchairs have just as much of a right to travel around the city and use the sidewalks as people who don't use wheelchairs. And so I worked on a case to get the city of Long Beach to fix their sidewalks. And that's one that did not make it into the book. And there are many, many others.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We had another patron who asked us, from your experience growing up, what advice would you give to parents who have a child with disabilities? How can we support our children while helping them advocate for themselves and challenge limits placed on them by others?
Being a disabled child, especially if you're in a family with lots of non-disabled family members, that can feel very lonely. It helps if parents learn disability skills and alternative techniques alongside their child. So if you have a blind child learning Braille, learn Braille with them. Understand the white cane. Understand screen readers. If you have a deaf child, learn sign language with them. So learn many of the disability techniques and strategies along with your child, and also help them build a disability community. For me, I got a lot of that by going to a blind camp in California where I can meet other blind kids my age and build friendships and relationships. There are virtual gatherings and camps happening now, as well as in-person, smaller, physically distant gatherings for people to build community. So help your child build one of those disability positive communities.
I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Now, we have another question sort of in the vein of child rearing, and this is, would you advocate to include sign language as a subject in our educational system, like we have ancient history, as a way to reduce barriers to communicate with people with disabilities, but also as a tool for people's lives that can be used in loud environments or to communicate from a distance when there's a lack of technology to do so?
I would love to see more schools teach sign language. You know, there are movements to get sign language offered as a language. So not just an introductory course, but a language you could study fully with over multiple years, alongside French or German or Spanish. So it'd be great if more schools could do this. And libraries can also be places for people to learn sign language. And the library could also start offering sign language classes.
I think that's great. Lauren is our programming director, and I think she's taking notes right now. So we had a participant who stated that your speech is so good. And they want to know, at what age did you lose your hearing, and what type of hearing loss do you have? They're also curious about when you lost your vision and asked if you have Usher syndrome.
I don't have Usher syndrome. Usher syndrome is one of the most common types of deaf blindness. It's not what I experience. What I experience doesn't really have a name. They just call it deaf blindness. And I was born this way. I had more vision and hearing when I was younger, but I never had 20/20 vision. It's similar with hearing as well. And I still have some vision and hearing. It's very little. It's so little that it really makes sense for me to say deaf blind rather than saying vision impaired, low vision, or hard of hearing. Because if I use terms based on hearing, like hard of hearing, then people start shouting at me. I don't want people shouting at me. That sounds angry. That's frustrating and stressful. And most of the time, I can't even understand shouting. Similarly, if I say I'm low vision, people ask, how many fingers am I holding? That's not a helpful question. So I'm controlling the conversation by saying deafblind. Let's find tactile, accessible ways to communicate. Braille is the easiest and most accessible way for me to access information. So that's what I ask people to do.
And I wanted to note, Nicole in our chat actually just pointed out that ASL is a language elective here in Lafayette Parish, but she would love to see it be more available throughout our region.
There are some schools where ASL is actually taught, but most schools, no. I mean, my high school, it was not offered as a language you could learn. Spanish was offered, and I studied Spanish. And because I'm deafblind, I was offered private sign language training one-on-one, but not formally, not something I can put on my transcript.
So one of our patrons has asked, how did you know that law school was your niche?
For the longest time, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I started college interested in computer science and mathematics, and over time, I experienced lots of discrimination in the field of mathematics and computer science. I also was experiencing other barriers at the college and outside the college, struggling to find work, that experience in Alaska. And I was so sick and tired of discrimination. So why not do something about it? Why not be one of those people who could help end ableism? So that's when I started getting interested in law school. So near the end of my college career is when I started looking into law schools, LSAT, applying to law schools, writing that personal statement, and all of that stuff.
So we had, since you mentioned law school, I'm gonna jump to this question because I'm a little bit curious about it too. That is the advantage when you get to ask the questions. What is the most challenging case you've worked on as a lawyer?
Gosh. I'm really not sure how to answer that question. Every case is challenging in its own way. Probably the case that I was most excited about and felt most rewarding to work on was the script case. The case to make a digital library accessible to blind individuals. And that was the story that made it into my book.
Okay. So I'm getting a lot of questions, and I'm gonna answer this one with a little bit of warning for our patrons who are skipping dinner for this one. But we want to hear about African food. One of our patrons said they loved the stories in your book about how your mom cooked foods for you.
I love Eritrean and Ethiopian food. I find it hard to cook because it takes so long, and I don't actually cook it very much. I have made maybe only 1 or 2 dishes. But my mom is an incredibly amazing cook, both for Eritrean and Ethiopian food and for Italian food and other food. So let me describe the food for people who are not familiar. You have a large plate, and on the plate is a large, spongy flatbread. You pour sauces, curries, meats, and vegetables on top of the flatbread, so it soaks up all the flavors of the stews and the sauces. Then you tear pieces of the bread, put it over the meats or the vegetables, and pick it up with your hand and enjoy. It's absolutely delicious. Do you have Ethiopian or Eritrean food in Lafayette?
You know what? I could not say. I have not seen an Ethiopian restaurant, so I'm gonna go look that up because after hearing that, I really want to try that.
We actually, I don't think we have any local, but we actually did a program with Sammy, and I can't maybe remember his last name, but he told us all about his travels to Ethiopia, and he described the food, and it was really awesome. We gave out, he made us a Burberry, and we passed it out to our patrons. I think I said that right. I don't know, but we passed it out to our patrons so that they could experience authentic Ethiopian seasoning. So it was actually pretty cool, and I was really proud of that program.
I'm going to go ahead and pull up that video and drop it in the chat for our patrons at the end of the program. Now, you talked a little bit about intersectionality earlier, and one of our patrons wanted to know, were you discriminated against because of your disability alone, or were there other factors?
It's hard to say because the people doing the discriminating don't pause and explain why they're discriminating. From their perspective, they think they're not discriminating at all. So for example, I took a mathematics class when I was in college because I wanted to major in computer science and mathematics. And the teacher was writing equations on the board and saying this and there without reading out loud what he had written on the board. And I asked, hey, can you say the equations you're writing on the board? And he'd do it for a moment and then completely forget and stop doing it. And I went to his office during office hours and explained, these are the barriers I'm experiencing in your class. And he said, the other blind student in my class gets it. Why don't you just ask him for help? Experiences like that kept happening in his class. And I eventually stopped going to that class. I complained to the university and I said, this is an issue. You need to do something about this, professor. He's not teaching me. And we worked out a system where I would study the coursework independently and wouldn't go to that class. Was he doing that because I was blind? Because I'm Black? Because I'm a woman? It's hard to say. He didn't say why he refused to teach me and answer my questions or to make his classes fully accessible. And I know many Black women have faced discrimination in math and science courses and have been discouraged from taking those classes by professors. I know other disabled students have similarly felt pushed away from math and science by professors. Intersectionality is tricky. It's hard to pinpoint the source, and that can cause stress, not knowing why someone is denying you access or refusing to be accessible.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I imagine that was deeply frustrating, and it's really amazing to see how you've tried to work to end that sort of discrimination, going forward. Now, I wanted to ask, we have a question from our audience. They wanted to know, we've talked a lot about a lack of accessibility, but what area of the world, as someone who's traveled a lot, do you find to be the most advanced in terms of accessibility?
Every place has something they do really well and other things they don't do very well. So, for example, Singapore has an amazing metro system and probably the most accessible metro system in the world. People who use wheelchairs and scooters have full access to the metro system. Whereas in the United States, San Francisco has so many stations that wheelchair users struggle to use, elevators that are broken and not working. New York City, DC, same issue. Canada does healthcare way better than the United States. So every place does something really well and then also has things they still need to work on.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, we have someone who, Harlan, who was one of our greeters earlier on in the program for you, if you were able to catch that pre-roll. He was a student at LCB at the same time as you were, and he wanted to know who your biggest role model was at that point, and why.
I've had many role models. My mother is one of my role models. She left Eritrea, walked for 3 weeks to Sudan, was a refugee for about 10 months in Sudan, and then came to the United States alone, not having any family, having to build up her English, learn a new culture and country. That's difficult and exhausting work, and she made it. So I often feel like I'm facing the unknown. I went to law school not knowing any deafblind people who'd gone through law school, not knowing any deafblind attorneys. It's a little like going to a new country all alone and leaving everyone behind. So she is one of my role models. Another role model is an activist named Mezun Zayed. She uses humor and storytelling to teach people about disability justice. Stories and humor are incredibly powerful, and like the law, they're tools that we should use to help promote positive change. Sometimes stories and humor can actually be more effective than litigation. So these are skills we need to build up and promote so we can create a more inclusive community.
Now, one of our patrons has asked about your early education before college. Would you be able to talk about that a little bit? And what that experience was like?
One of the early chapters in my book was from my experience in middle school. And I attended a mainstream public school. So there were non-disabled students and there were also disabled students. I attended classes mostly with non-disabled students. And the teachers knew I was there, but for the most part, they were mostly teaching the non-disabled students, and they left it up to me to do the work of advocating for myself and trying to get the material. There was a stretch of time in middle school where I thought this really nice teacher never gave us homework. And I was happy for that. I was not going to question that. But then one day they told me I was failing that class, which made no sense. Whenever they assigned work, I did it. But they were insistent that I was failing the class and not doing assignments. And it turned out the teacher was writing assignments on the board and I didn't see it. Or he was reading assignments from the back of the room and I didn't hear him. So what should we do about this? The result was that I had to ask the teacher for the assignment at the end of each class. I had to take responsibility for my education. I think it's important for all students to take responsibility of their education, but the burden should be on the school, not the student. Disabled students should just be students. We shouldn't also have to juggle making our coursework accessible. We shouldn't also have to advocate for the removal of barriers. That's the school's responsibility.
I appreciate hearing you discuss, putting the burden where it actually belongs, rather than placing that on the individual who is already being inconvenienced. I find that to be a very strong part of your advocacy work. Speaking of advocacy, I just want to backpedal a little bit. If you could spell the advocate's name, I believe it was Mayun Saeed. If you could spell her name so that some of our patrons can look her up.
Yes, you'll love her. So her name is Mezun.
Mezun.
M-A-Y. Oh dear. S-O-O-N. And then I think last name is Z-A-Y-I-D. That may not be 100% right, but you can look up her TED Talk, which is called I Have 99 Problems and Policy is Just One.
I will look that up now, and I'll drop it in the chat for our patrons right after the program. We are research specialists here. It's the very least we can do. Now, we do have a few questions about your future. So we had someone wanting to know, what are your plans for the future? What are your plans going forward?
I want to use all my gifts to help people. So I found writing a book is a way to teach people about ableism, give people a moment to laugh about a funny story. And in my future, I will continue advocating and continue helping people. And I'm open to adapting and adjusting and changing course. So I don't know exactly what's in the future, but I'll continue helping people. What do you think I should do? What do you want me to do in the future?
Oh, patrons, what would you like Haben to do in the future? And while they get those questions to us, I would actually like to ask, we had one earlier, they wanted to know a little bit more about your home life and your family. They wanted to know, Haben, how are your parents and your brothers?
My parents, my brothers, I also have a sister who's in the book, and they're all in the San Francisco Bay Area. They're doing well. I don't live with my family, but they're all within the same area.
Okay. Now, you talked a little bit earlier about some of the things, like some things are the best in one area or better in another area. One of our patrons wants to know, what does the U.S. do the best and what do we do the worst? And they're saying they want you to write more books.
I will take that into consideration, write more books. So what does the U.S. do really well? We're very litigious. We're good at using laws to create change. Sometimes litigation is too much and problematic. In other countries, I've seen the opposite, and it's harmful to not complain. Not complaining is a problem because then the barriers continue to exist. There are other countries with civil rights laws. For example, the UK has a Disability Equality Act, but not many people file cases. Not many cases come out of that. And there's still so many barriers in the UK. So we have used our ADA here more than many other places have used their civil rights laws. And the ADA has created lots of positive change. It hasn't fixed everything. There's still lots of problems. That's not really the fault of the ADA. It's the fault of all the employers and schools and companies that are ignoring disabled people. And that needs to end. So we need more places, more organizations to invest in accessibility and make disability access a priority.
I think that's fascinating, and I have to say that maybe one of the first times I've ever heard our litigious nature as the U.S. As a positive, and I can't help but agree. So, thank you for sharing that. Now, one of our patrons. Oh, before I continue, I wanted to get back with the question from earlier. Our patrons say they want you to visit Lafayette. They want to see you touring and speaking again. Another patron says they want you to visit us here in Lafayette. And Loretta would like to see you testify in Congress.
I love all of those plans, and I think they're absolutely possible. I'd love to visit sometime. I've been to Louisiana in the past, and have had amazing experiences there. I spent a summer in Ruston, and those stories are in my book. I've also visited New Orleans several times and had lots of fun dancing and eating good food. I hear Lafayette also has good food.
I think we like to brag on ourselves and say that our food is the best. But that might be the home team situation. Now
I'll have to test it and find out.
Well, one of our patrons, Stacy, who I believe, Stacy, you and I worked together back in the day. She says she loved reading about your progression from politely requesting accommodations for the lunch menu to demanding them during college. What advice would you give to other women who are nervous about the discomfort of that process? And she adds, it's me, by the way, I'm the one who is struggling to request accommodations.
I always start out very nicely and sweetly and give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they really have never heard of accessibility. I don't know how it's possible, but maybe for some reason they've never heard about making programs or schools accessible. So I'll give them an opportunity to learn. But if they still continue to refuse, then I'll mention civil rights. And if they're still refusing to change, then I'll work with a disability organization. There are free nonprofit centers that focus on disability rights, and you can talk with one of these organizations to get advice on advocating and removing that specific barrier.
Okay, well, I hope that helps enlighten and answer that question for Stacy. We had another patron who was fascinated by your Braille computer, and they said, I started looking them up myself online. I found out that there are Braille e-readers, which made me really excited. I was wondering what is keeping them from being more widespread.
Part of it is a lack of research in this area. Braille technology is pretty old. It's been around since the 1980s and hasn't changed a lot. It's changed in small ways. They have Bluetooth now. They didn't have Bluetooth in 1980. But if we invested more research and making digital Braille more affordable, then more people would have access to them, especially people in developing countries who need access to Braille so they can read books and articles and use the internet.
I think that would be great in terms of accessibility. Now, we have a patron who has some more questions about Braille. They said that when I was trying to help my daughter learn Braille, it seemed as if a different part of my brain was being awakened. Is there anyone in the field of education using Braille to teach literacy to the sighted who may benefit from the straightforward, tactical approach to literacy that Braille offers?
There is a sighted man in Boston who has written articles about how he loves reading Braille with his fingers. And I'm not remembering the title. His name is Paul Hostovsky, and I think one of his articles was in the Braille Monitor, which is a magazine that's available online. So there are definitely sighted people who read Braille with their fingers, including Braille teachers. But also people who do it for fun because it engages a different part of the mind than reading with the eyes. So I'm also really happy to hear this patron is learning Braille with his daughter. My parents never learned Braille. I wish they'd learned Braille. And I know lots of parents don't learn Braille with their blind child. So I'm excited this parent is doing that. And the Hadley School is a school that teaches Braille remotely. The Louisiana Center for the Blind might be able to have recommendations on who else could teach Braille in the area.
Thank you for that. I'm going to make a note of that because I believe that our resources, that is something that as a public library we should be keeping up with as well. Loretta asks if you could talk about your early education. Once again, she notes that your speech patterns aren't like what she's used to hearing from deaf people.
I've heard that a lot, and it's because my hearing loss is not the typical type of hearing loss. Most deaf people lose hearing in their high frequencies. Mine is the opposite. I have low frequency loss, which is why I speak at a higher register. Speech intelligence is more in the high frequencies. Consonants are at the heart of speech intelligence, and consonants tend to be high frequency. So that's why I developed the speech patterns that I do have. This is my very unique deaf voice. It's also an effect of growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area and the teachers and people I had around me growing up.
I would say around that time period, it was very common for people to have upspeak, I think was the term, sort of like how we have vocal fry now. We had a question about cochlear implants. They wanted to know if you have a cochlear implant or would you recommend it for children?
I don't qualify for one. My specific type of hearing loss wouldn't work with those. Hearing aids also don't help me. And in terms of do I recommend one for children? That's a very personal decision for the parents and the child.
Well, thank you for sharing that insight. We had a patron who asked, do you have trouble finding the Braille signs in buildings because they feel that they're not placed in consistent places?
If they're inconsistent, then yes. I will check for Braille signs in the center of doors and to the side of doors. And in the San Francisco Bay Area, I know there's sometimes signage on the side of stairs, so I'll sometimes check there. But if a sign is placed in a random place, then I'm not going to find it. So the people putting up these signs need to be very thoughtful and put them in logical places.
Now, this may be a personal question, but one of our patrons wants to know if you have any books you love or recommend.
There are many books that I love. So I feel like right now there's a lot of, most of my day I read a lot of painful articles about discrimination and struggles related to the pandemic. So when I read for fun, I like to be able to take a break from all of that and read something that makes me laugh. And one book that I read that made me laugh is The Princess Bride. Probably lots of people know that book. So I enjoy humorous books similar to that.
I think you and I would get along in terms of reading. I just finished rereading that one. It's a personal favorite. Now, speaking of reading, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but they wanted to know, would you agree that sighted tactile learners, such as people who have dyslexia or certain forms of autism, may be able to benefit from learning literacy through Braille?
You know, I know one sighted person who is dyslexic, learned Braille, and didn't find it useful. I've also heard some research that dyslexia is more than just vision. It's also different aspects of the brain. But I don't really have enough research at my fingertips at the moment to be able to fully answer that question.
Thank you for that. Now, this patron wants to know, if they were to meet you one day and you do not have your Braille machine with you, and they're not knowledgeable on how to communicate with you, how can they approach to make you feel comfortable and interact?
When I'm walking around, I always have my Braille computer and keyboard with me. I carry it in my purse. So when I get to the coffee shop, I put it on the counter and I ask the person to type on the keyboard. Or if I'm in a restaurant, I'll show it to the wait staff and ask them to type on it.
Okay.
I've also had people tweet and say, "Hi, Haben, I just saw you walking through this downtown area." So social media is another way to say hi.
I find that personally terrifying. I have friends who will tag me on social media and I'll be like, oh no, don't see me. Now, I think we have time for one last question before we start to wind down. Maybe two. This patron wants to know, what do you feel is your most important advocacy work currently? What issue do you see that can be addressed through mass advocacy, through systemic change in the near future?
A lot of stuff has moved online during the pandemic, and people who build tech, websites, apps, autonomous cars, they have the power to build tech that's fully accessible. Computers start out at ones and zeros, and they can convert those ones and zeros to sound, to graphics, to Braille, maybe to smells and taste as well. So I am very focused on getting technology to be more accessible, because that could help so many different people all over the world. And something people can do from home to make technology more accessible, when you post photos to social media or your website or apps, add image descriptions. Image descriptions allow blind individuals to know what's in the image, whether it's a flyer for an event or it's a personal photo. Add image descriptions so people who are blind can also participate in the conversation. And then for videos, add captions to your videos so deaf people can access the content. and transcripts are helpful for deafblind individuals. So those are some things people can do from home to make your digital content more accessible.
Well, thank you for that. And some of that are, I believe, are, measures we've been trying to implement here at the library. And myself, Kelly, Keith, all of us here on the community relations team have been working really diligently to make sure that, our patrons of all types can access our services. So I'm happy to hear that we're moving in the right direction here. Now, I'm afraid this is about all the time we have. If you would be so kind as to share, your final thoughts, I'd love to hear that.
All right, my final thoughts. Get ready. If you feel inspired by this presentation, allow that emotion to lead to action. Pick one barrier in your community and commit to doing the work to remove that barrier. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank our interpreter, Ms. Shirley Delahousie. Thank you so much for being with us. And also thank you to all of our patrons for your wonderful questions and for participating in this virtual program. We look forward to seeing you at more of our programs. And again, thank you so much, Haben, from all of us here at Lafayette Public Library. You have a great evening.